Hey everyone, it's your boy here, Mr. Jennings, back at it again. Make sure it sounds right. Okay, so today we are going to talk about the immune system. One of the things I was actually getting requested on before the hiatus was that we talk about the immune system for a little bit. I put it out there, we had a pretty good response considering how remind responses usually go. And I feel like this is something interesting and well worth a look at, especially given the current situation surrounding the epidemics around us. And by mentioning that word, I just got demonetized. Okay, back to this though. So here's the deal. What we're about to talk about is not explicitly on the AP exam. Now the new AP exam is different. Yeah, that's a great way to say that. So the AP exam is now, like if you didn't catch it the last video, it's 45 minutes, all FRQ based, and it's only going to cover units 1 through 6. When the redesign hit last year, well, at the end of the year last year to this year was the first year of the redesign, one of the things they cut was the immune system. However, College Board did say the immune system can be used as an example for cell signaling. Well, we're going to talk about it. It's also a great example talking about adaptations and such. Now, to the extent that stuff like evolution and adaptations are going to be omitted off this exam remains to be seen. But we need to talk about all this stuff here. So it's actually pretty cool. We're going to do this over a few videos. Main reason is this is kind of a long thing. I'm using a Prezi made by David Nufke. Really great AP Bio teacher. I use a lot of his resources. So shout out to him. Still coming at you from the makeshift studio. Hold on. Big orange bio. Yeah. My low tech budget icon. I got a new poster. Well, it's actually a very old poster, but I got a poster. And just want to kind of cut it a little loose here. Obviously, given the things going on. Alright, so let's talk about the immune system. Now, with this series of videos, I will probably be putting up a virtual lab to HHMI, as long as it's still there. I haven't double checked it since I'm recording this. The video virtual lab is completely optional, as always, during this time period, but I highly recommend you at least work through it because it's a great example of cell signaling. I think it's actually a really cool example of a lot of things. So I find the immune system to be incredibly interesting, and for many students, this here is an interesting topic. So I was planning on talking about the immune system anyway before the hiatus hit. We was going to do that when we did our review for cell signaling, but because I'm having to compose the review material kind of on shorter notice, I need to have something to fill the time. And we voted not to finish up Unit 8. Unit 8's ecology. I may still put up some material from it for those who were interested in finishing that out. But let's talk about the immune system. Enough waffling around here. Okay, so this here is a Prezi again used by David Nufke. So I'll have a link to this probably as well. So let's talk about the immune system. Now the immune system is probably one of the most interesting concepts for most students because it's something you're aware of, but you're not sure of the exact mechanisms behind it. And even this here is a very simplified version of the immune system and how the immune system works. So let's go through it just a little bit here. So, welcome to immunity. We're mainly going to focus on the animal immune system because that is obviously the more relevant one for us. But there we will eventually talk about prokaryotes, fungus, and plants, how they do their thing. Do part of the yawn, as you may have saw the clock here, it's very late. Alright, so big question is keep in mind, what is the purpose of the immune system? How does the immune system function? And ultimately, why do animals have a more developed immune system compared to other organisms? I mean, just look back here for a second. This is all animals, and here are prokaryotes and fungus and plants. That's a very tiny amount. So we'll talk about why that happens. Okay, so let's focus on the immune system of animals. Animals are the only organisms with a major immune system. All animals possess some degree of innate immunity. We'll talk about what that means here in a moment. And vertebrates also possess what's called an adaptive immune system, which can respond to very specific pathogens. Excuse me. So innate immunity is recognition of traits by broad ranges of pathogens using small set of receptors and often results in a rapid response. Things like barrier defenses such as skin, mucous membranes, and secretions such as sweat and tears. And there's generalized internal defenses, phagocytic cells, natural killer cells, antimicrobial proteins, inflammatory response. Now, adaptive immunity is only found in vertebrates. So we're talking about fish, reptiles, turtles, amphibians, birds, mammals. Not every, there's also like the notochords and stuff, but we're not talking about them right now. But this here, not every animal has these traits, but these are the ones that we're most familiar with. These are recognition of traits specific to a particular pathogen and uses a vast array of receptors. These are typically slower to respond because, well, there's a lot more to mobilize. There's the humoral response, which is antibodies defending against infection in bodily fluids. And cell-mediated response, which is cytotoxic cells defending against infection in body cells. Basically, they target infected body cells and they take care of it. Now, when we talk about pathogens, pathogens could be as simple as a virus in terms of size. Viruses are very tiny, obviously not very simple. It can be as complex as a bacteria. Now, bacterium and bacteria in general are pretty small, much smaller than a eukaryotic cell on average, but they can pack a large bit of damage. And then there's things like fungus. And fungus, we typically view as external, with the most common being yeast infection, but if they are internalized, they can be very difficult to treat. So we'll talk about why that is later. Now, the vertebrate immune system is comprised of many different organs and structures. The biggest one being the lymphatic system. The major parts of the specific immune system, again, is the lymphatic system and the population of leukocytes that patrol the circulatory system. Leukocytes means white blood cells. So the lymphatic system is a major circulatory system in your body. It's a secondary circulatory system. It's comparable to the main circulatory system when we think of with blood. However, the lymphatic system does not possess a pump system, does not have a heart to help pump the lymphatic fluid throughout the body, but it does rely on nodes. The most famous nodes in the lymphatic system are your adenoid and tonsils, up here in your throat area. The thymus, which is typically associated near your heart. That's actually how it gets back into the circulatory system. Your spleen. Here. Think about it. I can't even see it. I'm pointing down here. It's right around your liver on your left side. And there's various lymph nodes throughout the body and your appendix. The other lymph nodes are typically your pressure points, your armpits, the groin region, and around your feet and stuff. You'll find various lymph nodes. Basically, the way it works is, so you have your blood capillary here, and entangled into that blood capillary is lymphatic vessels. These lymphatic vessels are, let's move up, face here. These lymphatic vessels, there we go, hey, it zoomed in nicely. Basically catch a lot of times they catch spill-offs. Typically your blood system is not a completely nice plumbing system. There are leaks. So sometimes fluids do leak and they do fall into the lymphatic system. There's also interstitial fluid. The best way to explain that is it's neither blood nor lymphatic system. There's just fluid between spaces. There's a lot of fluid in you. Don't worry about it too much. Anyway, so they're two separate systems, but they can intertwine all the time. Things can get out of the from the blood system into the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system into the blood system as needed. All right, back to this here. So, as I said before, all animals. Oh, where did my face go? Okay. Okay, technical issues aside, sorry. As I was saying before, I don't know how much I cut off here. All animals possess some sort of a immune response. The most common being innate immune system. All animals have the innate system. There we go. Sorry. All right, the innate immunity is non-specific. These are immune systems that basically they don't respond to specific threats. They do respond to every threat, and they can be external and internal. Again, all animals on the planet have this system. Now, their specific adaptations do vary, but they do possess those systems. All right, so let's talk about the external. Now, external immune system includes barriers like skin, mucous membrane secretions like mucus and sweat and tears. Now, so the skin is your first line of defense. If you had an anatomy class, you may have heard of that. If you have not, the inflammatory system is one of the most vital systems of your defense. One, it's a waterproof barrier that allows you to retain fluids, but also it protects you from infection. Also, there's things on you that are called sweat glands that make the surface of the skin inhospitable to many microorganisms because your sweat's salty. It also messes with the pH a little bit. Makes it a little bit more acidic, so your skin's a little bit acidic. So most bacteria and viruses do not tolerate that very well. Also, your sweat increases the salinity of the system, and most microscopic pathogens do not tolerate that very well as well. So if something's on your skin, for the most part, it doesn't last too long. Varies, but typically lasts too long. There's a population of hundreds of also commensal species of microorganisms that do live on your skin, and they have a space that pathogens may otherwise occupy. So there's all sorts of like good things, such as good yeast and other various bacteria. They live all over you. You're covered in them. But they actually provide competition. Since they're there, pathogens can't take root. Whenever you are immune compromised, what happens typically is your body cannot sustain those commensal species, those species that do not harm you, because they're another communalism. But they get, some benefits because, they got a place to live. Since they do not harm you, but you don't have an immune system to kind of sustain it, a lot of bad things can move in and actually cause some really bad infections. So typically that's why you see whenever somebody's got through chemo or something, they can get like a lot more yeast infections on their skin in places, like in the folds of their skin. They can also develop sores because other rather rough pathogens start moving in and actually start eating away at the flesh. So that's typically what happens. Basically, your body can't sustain those communal populations because there's no immune system to support them. And the good stuff gets knocked out for bad stuff to move in. We are a very delicately balanced system here. Now, mucus. Snot. Mucus is disgusting and sticky for a very good reason. It actually makes it really hard for things to live. Mucus lines all mucous membranes, hence the name, in the body. And they're not as impenetrable as skin, so think of openings like your nostrils and your eyes. Those typically are your biggest mucous membranes that we talk about. They, membranous areas, your nose basically. So your nose is really on animals and mammals, the big one. Excuse me, it's almost midnight. Now, mucus lining this membrane contains lysosomes. As you remember, those are organelles that break down other cell parts. And most fluid secretion also contain lysosomes, and those disrupt bacterial cell walls pretty rough. So that's really good. Also, thicker the mucus, typically the less water you may want to drink more water, because that's really a problem. But typically the idea of thick mucus is it makes it actually harder physically for bacteria to move through to the mucus. And because it's harder to move through the mucus, it can't leave. It can't get anywhere worse. Problem is it will set up infections in certain areas like your sinuses. So that's when bacteria move up into your sinus passages and they can't go anywhere else. They set up shop in the sinuses. And as long as your mucus is stuck there, you can't get rid of them. Because mucus is just going to keep getting thicker to keep them from moving. So drink a lot of water, take an aspirin like Mucinex, and it kind of helps it move and break it up. Alright, so let's talk about epithelium. So, in the respiratory tract, there's a highly... the epithelial lining of the respiratory tract is highly ciliated, meaning they got these tiny little hairs all over it. They increase surface area. Together with the mucus, this system... Pop in here. Together with mucus, this serves as a trap for many pathogens, like I said, and they're eventually going to be pushed out of the respiratory tract and largely into the digestive system. That's what sinus drainage is. It's really rough. But the digestive system is highly acidic, and very few things can survive in the digestive tract. So once it gets in there, usually it's gone. Alright, let's talk about some of these internal adaptations. So these are internal innate. So first off, there is the internal innate immune system, which is responsibility of leukocytes that develop from myeloid stem cell precursors. Complicated way of saying. These are cells that develop and mature in the bone marrow. These are collectively known as the phagocytes. These are cells that eat other cells. So let's talk about here, because we don't really get to talk about cell specialization too much. Alright, so stem cells, if you don't know what stem cells are, these are basically cells that are blank slates. Myeloid stem cells are found in the bone marrow, differentiate. They either become lymphoid stem cells or myeloid stem cells. If they're lymphoid, they either become B or T cells, and they're called lymphocytes. More on those later. Excuse me. And myeloid stem cells can become a variety of different things. It can be red blood cells, neutrophils, basophils, monocytes, platelets, or acetophils. Excuse me. Now, phagocytes are populations of white blood cells that patrol the circulatory and lymphatic system. They phagocytize, basically they ingest and digest any material that they do not recognize. There's a lot of receptors that allow self to recognize self. We'll talk about what happens when that doesn't work. But following phagocytosis, pieces of pathogens are usually presented to the specific immune system for a possible specific response. So in mammals and other vertebrates, after phagocytes usually break down something unknown, they're going to take the parts and basically it's going to get sent to the specific immune system, the adaptive immune response, and humoral or whatever, and they're going to respond accordingly. They're going to develop a specific response. Now, the inflammatory response. This happens actually quite a bit in different ways. Basically, anytime the skin is ruptured or the body is otherwise infected. So almost every major infection you deal with has an inflammatory response. And actually, a lot of the complications from many diseases is your body's overreaction to the inflammatory response. Fevers, for instance, are actually a part of this, typically. So, let's say you get a nasty splinter. So let's say you get a nasty splinter. Now this nasty splinter here punctures, so that helps. This nasty splinter here punctures your skin, like it does. Get a nasty splinter going out there outside, and what happens is a bunch of signaling molecules are going to be nearby, mast cells and macrophages. They're going to signal a bunch of things. And it's going to create the movement of fluid. Blood's going to rush to the area. When blood rushes to the area, it's going to bring in all sorts of immune response cells. and you're going to get inflammation and swelling, and typically you're going to bring a good immune response. So cells at the site of infection will release signaling molecules that recruit other population of phagocytic cells to the area, and these signaling molecules also increase blood flow. That's what gives you the swelling and redness. This could be a problem, though, if you say instead of got punctured by a splinter, you got cut by a sword or something. I don't know. Let's say you got sliced, and your body's going to do the inflammatory response because skin's ruptured. Got to treat everything. There's pathogens possibly on that blade, so they're going to rush the cavalry to the wound, which is going to cause it to bleed out. It's like a flat tire situation. The splinter being in your skin for just a little bit there, to be fair, touching the major blood capillaries, it keeps it from bleeding. But if you got sliced or a complete rupture, the immune response can actually be counterproductive. So you have to put tourniquets and stuff on if you have a major wound. All right, let's talk about receptors. All right, so your body does have receptors to help you recognize a variety of things. These receptors are receptors are present on the surface of phagocytes, and they respond to molecules found in fungi, bacteria, and viruses, but not in animal cells. Invertebrates also possess a series of antimicrobial peptides, like proteins, that activate these toll-like receptors. Essentially, though, your cells have a bunch of receptors present on them that if there's a fungus or bacteria or virus cell around, they're going to be secreting molecules that they don't like. They'll be activated to it. So they basically, while they are not cognitive, they have a bunch of chemical receptors that detect the presence of a pathogen. But that doesn't recognize animal cells. That could be a catch. All right. And this shows you the results here. Fruit fly survival after infected by different fungi and bacteria. And you can see that. Not too worried about it. All right, before I'm going to go any further, I'm going to probably stop this video right here. And we'll do the adaptive immunity in a minute. Okay, so just to wrap up here for this part. All animals have innate immune response. They can be external and internal. The external stuff like your skin, mucous membrane, secretions, things like lysosomes and those secretions really help. And also your skin's it's kind of slightly acidic. It's slightly basic at times, and it's very salty. And many other animals have other adaptations. For instance, reptiles, when they sunbathe, and birds for that matter, sunbathing actually introduces UV rays that actually kills the pathogens that may be on them. So you can also have non-specific internal responses like phagocytes, which creates the inflammatory response, which can be good or bad. Typically it's good, but most of the major complications you do see from most infections are actually because of the innate responses. All right, so thank you for watching. Part 2 will be coming up really right after this. I'm just going ahead and marathoning these out. See you soon.